This is the second day of the January 96 7-day retreat in Springwater. Let me first say something for the sake of people who are here for the first time, that most of these talks are made up out of questions that arise in meetings, both individual and group meetings. These questions, and our working with them are the rivulets that feed this stream of talking. If there is something in a private meeting that you do not want to hear mentioned in a morning talk, then please let me know. I will not bring it up. Of course, whatever is brought up is kept anonymous. Which brings me to the first topic of our talk today, which concerns bringing up questions in meetings. Someone drew my attention to the fact that yesterday in the talk I said that some people address questions to me as though I was an authority or an oracle. And for the listener of this particular statement, there was implied criticism of bringing up certain questions. At any rate, it became a concern. Well, when I bring up a question, will that be seen as an intelligent question or an unintelligent question? Will I be judged as looking for authority? It's a good thing to bring up, isn't it? And to look at here together this morning. My own first thought when I heard this was, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But under scrutiny, I shouldn't say anything, because whatever is said can be misunderstood or can not cover the whole thing. It doesn't cover the whole thing. Whatever I bring up in a talk, as far as the expressions are concerned, the words, is never the whole thing. And what is meant needs to be elaborated in dialoguing together. This is the beauty of having this opportunity in the presence of daily talks to bring up what isn't clear, what the reaction is, questioning what I'm saying. Maybe I didn't say it clearly. Maybe on looking at it again, it needs to be put differently or explained more or whatever. So this is a good working model. Talking, and then if something isn't clear or when one disagrees, one doesn't see it this way, to feel free to bring it up. Maybe in one's background conditioning, one has not felt free to bring it up, but there can always be change, no matter how heavily we are conditioned. Our source is free. And if that comes to the fore, we can rotate freely, like on a ball bearing, without friction, without limitation. So let me look again right now, carefully, at what I remember having said, which may not be accurate. We'd have to listen to a tape. We won't go through all of that. We were talking about creating authority in others and our inherent yearning for being taken care of by someone who we believe is superior in some way or other, superior knowledge, superior experiences, or longer, better experiences. And wanting to hear from that person. And in hearing a question of this kind, I feel myself raised to the position of authority in that person's eyes. Maybe I don't take it into the image and feel superior, but I can see a process going on. Well, it is for each one of us to look as we ask a question, if we're interested in this, to see, am I making this person into an authority, taking on face value, believing in what she says, feeling, being guided by it, doing it that way, thinking along that line as I hear her talk? Or am I just interested in hearing what this person has to say? I'm not going to make them into an authority. What they say may be interesting or worthwhile examining, or maybe even at this moment, yeah, this is so, I've seen it myself, this is true, it is so. Or, no, I haven't seen this. I'll tentatively take it along, but I need to verify it myself. We're all interested to hear what people have to say, who we respect for their experience. Maybe we have read, heard what they say, and are interested in hearing it, which does not mean necessarily making that person into an authority, meaning to abide by the word said by that person. So, we've already made it more clear. It's not a simple thing. It's not either it's this way or it's that way. It can be all kinds of ways, and we have to look openly, affectionately at what we're saying to each other, how we're communicating with each other, to try to understand each other and ourselves. So, if I understand it this way, that this person only wants questions addressed that don't imply authority, I'm in a fix, because I have all kinds of questions. Do I now have to think them all over? How will she interpret them? Or will I just ask a question? And we can look at what all goes into it as we go. Maybe at this moment I'm not interested or not capable in coming upon motivation. I'm not capable? Maybe I am. Maybe I think I'm not. I can always ask, why am I asking this question? Why do I want to ask this of this person? And it depends how one asks oneself. Is one already critical of oneself? Is maybe doing something wrong or inappropriate, disapproved of by the person of whom one will ask it? Or is there just plain innocent looking? What is the reason that I want to find out from her? What she has to say. And maybe in an innocent question which doesn't immediately give answers, well, I'm one of those she's talking about. No answer, just asking a question into empty space. The empty space of not knowing. And sometimes out of that come responses. Something reveals itself. Yes, I would really like that security of finding somebody. I've looked at so many teachers. I want to find somebody who can answer my questions. Maybe that feeling, yearning, reveals itself as being part of the motive for asking the question. So we're learning about ourselves, not that we're wrong in this, or we must hide this, or control it because of what she said, but finding out in the light of what is being mentioned in a talk about ourselves. I find out, yes, I want to have the security of someone who can answer my questions, but I'm still interested to find out, what does she have to say? Now that I see this yearning, I can question it. Where does that come from? And I don't mean going at it analytically, mentally, but asking it into space without knowing. And allowing the whole being, with all of its stored stuff, to respond. Which it does. It's amazing. Not always. Sometimes from different levels. One may feel, yeah, this sounds okay, but it's not the whole thing. Is there more to it? And again, leaving it alone, letting the whole thing respond by itself, the whole past. Maybe I haven't made this too clear, but we have meetings where this can be brought up. So please, I say again, as I did yesterday, feel free to bring up whatever at this point in time arises as a pressing question. Maybe I'm saying too much as a pressing question, because somebody may say, well, I have questions, but they're not that pressing. So, as a matter of fact, people often say, while I was sitting out here in this beautiful space down there, which you call the solarium, all these questions I had sort of seemed to melt away. Either they lost their importance, or they answered themselves. And now it's just nice to come in and sit quietly together. And maybe after a few minutes, something will pop up freshly. Someone mentioned that, like all other techniques and methods one may have been acquainted with or practiced, known about, meditative inquiry too can become a concept, a technique, and it can be used as a weapon. Only upon thinking of this later, and again having the time and space to let it spread out, do I get some feeling for what the person may have meant. I didn't ask right then, what do you mean? Give me an example. I didn't do this. So, of course, just generally speaking, it is so true. Anything in this abstraction-creating mind, thought, having that compulsion, that purpose, that function to abstract, to formulate, make into a concept what may at one point have been experienced directly, to abstract from that, make something into a theory, or as this person said, a weapon, having attained a skill in inquiring from being here and using it against someone else as a weapon. Or so it was experienced. I didn't ask, were you the user of the weapon or were you the victim of someone else using it? Or maybe both. Maybe we are familiar with this as a technique in arguing, firing questions at a person. Well, who is it that is saying this right now? Not out of a spirit of inquiry, but to put the person into a place or to gain an advantage of superiority. Is that what is happening at times? The best thing, of course, is if one has that feeling it's happening right now, to feel free to lay it bare. Am I using this right now as a weapon against you? Or are you doing that right now? And let's pause and look. Which is not easy, because if one feels victimized or accuses someone or feels accused, then the chemicals vibrate this body in a way that may not allow it to be spacious in looking. It's easier at retreat time, where we're in touch with spaciousness, if just for instants at a time. So if I ask you, are you using this as a weapon against me? What you just said, who is it that's talking, or whatever sort of questions one may have developed a skill in asking. Will we be able to look freely? I'm not accusing you. I'm just seeing something. And it's very important for us to look at, to discover, to expose. If I am the accused, let me just use these words. It may not be that heavy. If I'm the accused, again, will I be able to look so spaciously that I can see, yes, I was trying to gain an advantage over you, or no, that wasn't there, truly not there, not in order to save my image, but because it is either there or not there. And that image saving is a very important ingredient of our responses? Am I free to say, yes, you're right? I was trying to knock you out, or at least put you at a distance. Or, no, I really mean it. Can we look that freely in our talking with each other? Do we give each other that freedom? Which means letting go of imagery of ourselves and each other, which is there. It has to become transparent, or that it is there, so it doesn't rule the day in the moment. Because at the instant I see, yes, I want to preserve an image that I wouldn't do such a thing of attacking someone. I don't see that such an image is there. It will keep operating secretly, unbeknownst. I'll say, no, this wasn't the reason. So do I say, no, I wasn't using this as a weapon? Because really, it's clear that's not the case. There is no holding on to an image, or the image is clear. Or will I save something, protect something about myself? Is this getting difficult? Is it difficult to follow? On day 2 is very early in a retreat. One person yesterday told me, I missed 50% of your talk. I was so tired. But it's still an interesting point to bring up right at the beginning. Because it's something to look at as we relate to each other. And in the absence of clarity and freedom from image, inevitably project stuff onto each other that may or may not be there. Somebody asked yesterday in a group, you were mentioning superficial rewards, like, in what connection was it? Gaining superiority. Whatever the context was. Gaining superiority, we can take this context. I've got you here. I've asked you a question and you can't answer this, you're stumped. And I feel superior. Let's take that. And the superficial reward from that, that's what we were talking about yesterday. When the self-image is fed flattering food, there's some reward. The system, the organism mobilizes some energy. One feels important, or in charge, in control, better than others. All of these thoughts and the very fact of what just happened are not just words and verbalisms, they are also physical events. The body being an ongoing process of releasing chemicals and charges that mobilize organs and glands to release their juices. And the brain itself, we've all heard by now about neurotransmitters, chemical conduction, which could almost be a physical definition of thought, the conduction in chemicals and charges to the rest of the organism, and what that mobilizes in terms of feelings, emotions, stresses, tensions, or releases. So that was referred to yesterday as a superficial reward gained from maybe getting the upper hand in an argument, winning my point and seeing you lose. Or the person who brought it up, actually the question was not just referring to talking about superficial rewards, but was wondering whether there was any reward that was not superficial in that same sense. Is there anything that we do for feeling good that isn't superficial in its rewards? And he gave an example of going with friends to a disco, having a hilarious time, and thinking and saying to oneself, I'm having a wonderful time, and underneath the realization, I'm not having a good time at all. It's sad. Something is sad here, and the other people too. So what felt rewarding was also seen as not rewarding at all. So it's a good question, isn't it? Is there any reward that isn't superficial? Superficial in the sense of, I gotta have it again and more of it. The body gets used to its own stimulations and states that these stimulations produce, and it wants more, needs more. It has this inherent capacity to get used to good things, pleasant things, satisfying, gratifying things. After a while, it becomes stale. And this seemingly everlasting yearning for the more, or the different stimulation. Of course, we could go a little bit more into what we mean by reward, the reward that we have so far mentioned of the body doing its own rewarding by the gratifying energies produced by certain thoughts about myself. Well, the disco is the whole situation there, the music, the drinking, the laughing, the companionship. Or wanting to be acknowledged by others, wanting to be appreciated and approved of, admired. And when that's happening, the physical reward by an organism that responds to those words of admiration or appreciation, words spoken or written, the audience, clapping, a skating program we saw the other night. How does it feel to these skaters as the people rise from their seats and clap and yell? Must produce an incredible addiction for more. One person told me that once. She was an actress and dancer. And seeing a superb skating couple do their perfect dance, and the audience rising to this, she said there was such a yearning to have that kind of an applause herself. Just almost swept away with the whole thing in the imagination. That could happen to me. And then the same couple a few years later trying to recapture that situation, and it didn't quite work. There was such disappointment in the faces that were so glowing before. Such pain and despair. Felt, of course, unjustly judged. So all of us have grown up to crave in one form or other acknowledgement, whatever form of acknowledgement suits us. Different people get a rise out of acknowledgements that others would not. Maybe acknowledgement of criminality, press coverage, book fame. But we all know it in one way or another, this incredible need and dependency on gaining a continuous approval from others. And when that is ruptured, even just momentarily, what is the state? As the approving face or word turns into disapproval or somebody else is approved of, and I'm slighted, people don't even look at me. It's now all going towards someone else. That's what we talked about in the beginning. Maybe I didn't say it, about eye contact, to come into direct touch with our dependency on how we look to others, judging by the way they look at us. Do they like us? Do they seem impressed? These are such habitual modes, we may not even be aware of it. Sometimes this comes with time, or rather with a deepening or stabilizing of attention. Then this becomes more transparent. But we all know the pain of not being approved, of being disapproved. Or thinking we're disapproved. We may not even be, but we think we are. So, in the light of this, there is the question now, is there anything, any way of being which does not need a reward, superficial or deep? We haven't gone into whether there is such a differentiation. It's too complex. I don't have to. Is there any way of living, doing, being, which is independent of reward, independent of how other people react to it, approvingly, disapprovingly? I mean, due to all of our great addiction, if you will, to being approved of, we've been raised this way, praise and punishment, reward and punishment. The body may almost always react with some gratification when somebody says, "Nice job, you did." But does one really need it? Is dependent on it, even though it feels good at the moment. Does one now have to think for the next 5-10 minutes all day long how wonderful this is that the person approved of me, and sort of the pictures being reprojected in the mind to reignite that rewarding mechanism in the body? Or is it just a momentary thing? Somebody says, it was good bread you baked. It feels good, and then you can let it go. You don't need it, because baking this bread, or doing the gardening, or being in a meeting is its own fulfillment, fullness, joy, delight, which needs nothing outside of itself. And let me say it again, even though it feels good when somebody acknowledges and says this was a good meeting or a good meal or beautiful garden, lovely woodwork, whatever all we may do, or write a good article, a good book. It feels good. The organism is conditioned to pump gratification chemicals, which have their effect. But that wasn't the main motive. That's just extra. It comes and goes and doesn't need to be held on to. Because one's moment-to-moment living or aliveness is sufficient unto itself. Whatever one may be doing, wow, that's a big step, isn't it? Because there are lots of things we're doing which are not fun, or we don't think they're fun. We loathe them before we've started doing this thing. There's interference from memory. And that memory is powerful. It doesn't let through what is really happening as I'm doing this, because it says this is a terrible thing. I have to get over this. I want to do the next thing. This I hate to do. And there is a real challenge when we notice it. When we don't notice it, it goes on. That's how we work most of the time. Most of us, not everybody, not all the time. Trying to get through this thing to something better. And if there is awareness dawning that this is what's going on right now, skimming over something with loathsome ideas about it, how I hate this, or how boring it is, how uninteresting. At that moment to stop, look and listen, to pause. And see whether it's possible to be finishing this job, whatever it may be, free from the memory of how I think it is. To really do it like how would you call it? An experiment. And for that, the rushiness needs to drop off. That becomes very clear that rushiness is part of the trying to get through it. And therefore the absence of witness, the absence of being there, alive with what is there to be done. It amazes me every time that there is the stopping and looking, that our biggest problem is the rushing through it and having an idea that I hate to do this kind of thing. With the idea in suspension, under suspension, what is the washing dishes, or what is it at this moment of really nothing else in this moment but the washing dishes. Of course, the wind is also howling, and that becomes very clear at a moment of stopping, pausing to freshly live. Then all of a sudden, the world is rich. Rich with aliveness. I don't just mean the aliveness of sensations, although that's the first thing noticeable. The senses, alive, open, receptive. But there may be more than alive senses, which is this space we've been talking about. Space without borders, without content, just permeating every moment with its stillness. The stillness of no lack. We will end here for today.